president is going around the track in the presidential limousine as the starting, like when the pace car. So later on, check it out on YouTube or the news. You'll see the presidential limousine driving around 500 in Florida, which I think is a brilliant move since NASCAR is a highly watched sport, especially amongst conservatives, so to speak. And there are, I guess, some people on the fences, so hopefully win those people over, especially in a swing state like Florida. It's a good, brilliant move in my opinion. So just a point of interest, if you want to check that out, please do that later on today. Our guest speaker, Ray Riley, will be here shortly. I spoke with him this morning, and he will be on his way. Talking around, he is not the world's greatest, although I did find a spot across the street, so that was very lucky. Our next meeting, I believe, what did we say that was in March? I did it on the end. I'll look it up. Okay. We're going to have another meeting for us in March. I believe it's March 20-something. We'll get that exact date in a second. So we'll have a meeting then scheduled for down here in this location. 1:30 to 3:30 will be the location, and we'll get you the exact date in a second. I just wanted to thank everyone, especially in light with the president, what he's been going through with the impeachment, and then obviously the acquittal, and obviously the witches are getting those brooms ready to go again, trying to stoke the flames, getting the torches ready to go again, because there's no satisfying the left. There's no satisfying what they like to do. They don't like our president because they know he's getting results, and that's a threat to them for what they believe in. And what they believe in is socialism and communism. They are heading towards trying to destroy our nation. You have people like Bernie Sanders, who's their front runner. At least he's authentic, right? At least he tells you what he is, and he doesn't hide from it. So good for him in that regard. But God help us if he does become our president. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. Don't think, oh, Bernie will win anyway. Don't sit home. Make sure. I know it's a blue state here in New York, but that doesn't mean you can't affect national politics. Yes, you could. You could volunteer for the Trump campaign at their headquarters. Once that gets going, once we get more information, we'll let you know. And you can do phone banking from New York. That helps people from other states. To get them to come out and vote, we'll make sure they know about the message of the president. So there's things you could do here in New York. Like I said, I'm still waiting to hear from the RNC. Hopefully I will become a delegate myself to represent New York for Donald Trump at the Republican convention. So hopefully that will be, at least for my part, to support the president. I was a big supporter of the president since the beginning, even back in 2012. I said that guy is the one that could beat Hillary Clinton moving forward, because we needed someone with a name recognition, not some governor, not some senator, someone with, coined the phrase from the Clintons that they used to use, gravitas. Someone with gravitas, and we found that person. We found someone that didn't care about politically correctness. That's what makes politicians unauthentic, because they all want to skirt and say, ooh, I don't want to offend people, ooh, yeah, they give the PC answer, and any normal person will say, what the heck did he just say? People like the president because he speaks plainly. He speaks to everyone. Everyone could understand him. Everyone says, oh yeah, that's what I would say. And good, because at the end of the day, we want someone to cut through the minutia of what is Washington, and he's done that. So with that being said, I see our guest speaker just arrived.
How are you?
Ray, welcome,
Oh,
sir.
my goodness.
So give us a couple minutes.
Yeah, do what you gotta do.
We're good. A couple reports from the president. Yep. Everyone good?
Sure.
Come on down, Ray. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Ray
Say some hello to some very important people. How are you?
Well, and should we do the swearing in first, just to give Ray a chance to settle in?
Yes, we could do that. Want to do that?
Let's do that last.
We'll do that later.
Do it last.
We'll keep everyone in the seats.
Have a seat. Hopefully. There should be seats on the side.
I think on that side.
I think there might be a seat over on the side, so they'll be up against the wall.
And you said you have to get
Wherever you feel is good. Whatever makes you comfortable.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ray Riley, I know Ray for a very long time, with our battles through Bay Ridge, Senator Marty Golden, and
Yeah, pretty
we
decent.
see unfortunately how Bay Ridge has become Park
More
Slope
football.
South or East or whatever, where the heck we are. And unfortunately, they're getting their gravel hooks. As you can tell, you could always tell when the bike lanes pop up, right? Whenever the bike lanes come, oh, it's progress from the progressive.
It's actually
Right,
regressive.
so that's always a good sign, unfortunately. But hopefully we will win that seat back moving forward in the 22nd Senatorial District, and we will hopefully get that seat back. But we need to make sure we get our message out there. We need all of you here to get that message out. We need to get that seat back. We need to support other candidates too throughout our districts. And that requires getting signatures on the ballot, and Ray will probably talk about that, I'm assuming, or...
We'll talk a lot about the process.
Give it a sec, Glenn, because I want a live stream.
Official in his capacity.
I don't know, Gia. I have no idea.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ray Riley.
Hold on, give me 2 seconds, I want to live stream it.
Okay. I guess we're doing Facebook Live.
Correct.
We're experiencing technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen. Please stand by. Yes.
Oh, I can't even hear you.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I live in 97. All right, yeah, 186.
Planning. So, Alan, are we good?
If I was, I'd let you know.
Oh, okay. This is exciting programming, ladies and gentlemen, right?
Do you want the, you like getting people involved over the internet, so do I, Glenn.
Okay.
Takes us a moment.
For our internet audience also, we are a multifaceted organization, we also have an internet. Yeah. Okay,
All right, so we're good now.
oh, we're good, very good. Thank you for our audience on Facebook for joining us today for the Brooklyn Tea Party meeting at the Kings Highway Library, 2115 Ocean Avenue in Brooklyn. Our guest speaker today is Ray Riley, the Chief Clerk of the Board of Elections. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, my good friend, Ray Riley.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ray Riley. I'm the Chief Clerk of the Kings County. I start everywhere I speak by asking the following questions, and I want honest answers. Who in this room is registered to vote in New York City? Outstanding. I can skip my speech. So, I currently work at the Kings County Board of Elections. How many people have worked as poll workers in this room? Okay. How many people have heard of the Board of Elections? In any sort of capacity? All right, that's good.
I've worked there.
All right, so you've worked. Perfect. So we are a bipartisan agency, right? And that is mandated by state law and state constitution. 50% of us are Republicans, 50% of us are Democrats. It's designed in such a fashion so that everybody keeps an eye on each other and that everything's even Steven. There's many board of elections across the country that are set up this way. Ohio is a good example. Another one that does it that way, but we do it that way in New York. What do we do at the Board of Elections in New York? Unlike other states, we're responsible for every single facet of elections. You'll hear of secretaries of states in other places, or have other organizations that'll manage the rolls, and then the boards will deal with just the elections. Not the case in New York. We do everything. from registering you to vote, to finding poll sites, to prepping ballots, to making determinations on how if candidates are qualified, to certifying elections. So it's one-stop shopping here. Brooklyn represents the largest county in the state. 1.5 million active registered voters. When you include the inactives, we're somewhere just north of 1.7. It's about the 5th or 6th largest jurisdiction in the country. That number fluctuates a little bit from time to time. So it's an extremely large operation. We have about 420 poll sites in Brooklyn. We just instituted early voting. So it's a lot of new and exciting stuff. I'm glad. There were a lot of people like early voting. I think we're going to see a little bit more of that as we move forward. Churchill said that democracy was the worst form of government except for everything else. And that's probably a good way to describe, democracy. It is messy at times, but it's important. It's still better than everything that's out there. We at the Board of Elections try to do our best to make sure that every single person in this room's voice is heard, and make sure that every single person in this room, outside this room, and in the city has an opportunity to cast their vote in a somewhat quickly for 1.5 million people, but efficient manner across the city. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how that process works. I'm going to talk a little bit about what big changes we've seen over the last really year, with a lot of legislative changes that have happened up in Albany that have been at kind of a breakneck speed and have very much changed the way that we do business. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about why it's important for everybody in this room to be involved in the process. So I got my start in politics at a very young age, over 20 years, seems like a lifetime ago. When a guy by the name of Marty Golden was in the city council. Marty was in the city council from 97 to 2001. He ran for Senate in 2002. And he was a neighbor, and he approached me one day, and I had gotten involved in a local issue with a bus on a block that people wanted to move. And he found me at a meeting, and he said, you're a really good guy, you seem like you know what you're doing, you're a smart kid, why don't you get involved? And from that moment on, I was hooked in the process. And I worked on and off for the senator for several campaigns and several years. I spent some time down in DC working on John McCain's 2008 presidential campaign. I spent some time in people in this room when former Mayor Michael Bloomberg was still a Republican and was running for re-election. And then I worked on several Senate and congressional campaigns. Bob Turner comes to mind, David Storobin comes to mind, Mike Allegretti comes to mind. And then I spent 2 years after I left the senator's office, shortly after his 2014 re-elect, where he got about 70% of the vote, and I spent a couple of years with Maimonides Medical Center doing community outreach and kind of working to increase access and knowledge on different issues in healthcare. And then in 2017, I started over at the Board of Elections, and I've been there since. So that's a little bit about me and where I've been and how I got to where I am. The big overviewing picture I want to talk about with the board, and again, it's the process matters, right? And being involved in that process is fundamentally important. We have in Brooklyn on an annual basis a training of roughly 21,000 poll workers every single election year. Of that 21,000, roughly 15,000 of them will work any given election from any given year. That's the front line. It's not the guys in the office. It's most of you in this room that are poll workers, right? That's who every voter will interact with. That's who every voter talks to. That's who they see. So as I like to say that the poll workers are the most important people at the Board of Elections, because you're the ones that are doing all of that frontline interaction with everybody. It's not me, right? It's not the heads of the registration department or the EDO departments. It's the poll workers. So for those of you that do that, I want to thank you. At times be thankless. It's a long day. It's a lot of hours, and we appreciate you putting the work in. For those of you that aren't poll workers or haven't worked as poll workers, and I say this having worked local campaigns, congressional campaigns, and national campaigns, there is no better way to learn how the sausage is made than working the polls. It is the one way that you will learn the ins and outs of democracy, right, in this city. How people vote, where they vote, and how that process works is fundamental. And if you really want to learn how it happens, and you know, if you're active in campaigns, if you're active in politics, which all of you in this room must be to be here on a Sunday afternoon, you know, this is the best way to learn the ins and outs of the process. So I've got information in the back. I strongly, strongly suggest that if you have the opportunity to do it, even just once, to do it. You know, so that kind of brings up the importance of the poll worker and the work that you do. Legislative changes. These are big, these are fun, these are exciting. Last year we had a change in power in Albany, which I will leave my personal commentary aside. But with that came some wholesale changes to how we do business in New York State and in New York City. So the first big thing, which I'm sure some of you are aware of, is early voting. This is a fundamental change to how we do business. It's 9 days. It starts 2 Saturdays before Election Day. It runs till the Sunday after. We had about 1% of the registered turnout. No, 1% of registered voters, about 8% of those that turned out in November voted early. It was light, but it's kind of what you would expect for a first go-around. We did 18 sites in Brooklyn, more than any other borough, and we will have this for every election moving forward. You know, the arguments pro or con aside, it does help us increase access to local communities so that they have an extra opportunity to vote. I like to use 2018 as a good example of this. We had some bad weather. We had some longer lines at certain places, and you know, some of our they call them in Marine Park active adults, so I'll stick with that terminology. But our older voters, right, aren't going to necessarily want to wander out in the cold and the rain. They're not going to want to stand on an hour and a half line at times, right? So doing 9 days of voting is helpful to some of those communities to make sure that they have access, right? So you know, in terms of that, I think early voting, you know, will help us. You know, make it easier for people to go to the polls. There were big changes on the registration deadline. That's another big thing that took place. You used to have to change parties by the October of the year prior. So if you wanted to vote in a primary in June, you had to have switched your registration previously by October. That date has now been changed to, it was Friday, it was Valentine's Day, so it would be Valentine's Day as well. There's some other big legislative changes that have not been finalized, that have not been finished. AVR has been out there in the news, that hasn't gone anywhere. The other big thing that happened, which we won't see this year but next year, happened with charter revision, which is ranked choice voting, is coming to local races. How many people in this room know what ranked choice voting is? So, ranked choice voting is a system in which you get to rank your choices, right? It's, Proctology is one probably way to put it. Essentially the way it works is if there are 4 people running for office, each person, you get to rank each person in your order of preference. Okay. The argument being that if no candidate gets above 50%, whoever the last choice was, whoever voted for that person would then have their second choice counted. That's coming, that was on the ballot last November, in the questions on the back. About 19% of New Yorkers went to the polls last year, and that passed. So that will be, we will see that.
Nobody knew what it was.
Yeah.
Right.
The Charter Revision Commission that puts those questions on the ballot. That's done through the mayor and the Charter Revision Commission, which is.
Does that mean your vote can go to somebody from an opposite party?
No, because it applies in New York, is my understanding, in primaries.
Oh.
So the objective of the ranked choice voting is to remove the runoff. So instead of having a runoff, you would do this, and then the tabulation would be done, you know, internally, and then you get to 40% or 50% or whatever the minimum threshold number is, without forcing everybody to have to go back to the polls again 2 or 3 weeks
It's
later.
only for primaries, correct?
Yeah, that's my
Does
understanding.
it stay in one party when you do ranked choice voting?
Well, it does, yeah, because each
I'm new to this.
yeah, each, so
I'm
each,
looking it
yeah,
up.
New York has closed primary, that's a good